Hello and welcome to IMA's Inside Talk webinar series. The title of today's presentation is Controller's Guidebook, the Role of Technology in Retaining and Recruiting Accountants, and our featured sponsor is FloQast. My name's Sam Walker and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a couple of reminders. First of all, please use the Q&A window on the right side of your screen to send questions to the presenter or to request technical assistance. Please keep in mind that refreshing your browser will correct most of connection issues that you might experience. Secondly, in order to earn CPE credit today, you must participate completely in the live webinar by logging in on time and by responding to the poll questions. At this time, I'd like to introduce our featured presenter for today's program, Stefan van Duyvendijk. Stefan, welcome.
No worries, Sam. I got it. Stefan van Duyvendijk. It's a tough one. I put a tongue twister on you today.
Absolutely. Stefan is the accounting operations evangelist at FloQast. Previously, Stefan served as a corporate controller for Kodiak Cakes, a private equity-owned leading consumer packaged good company, as well as a controller for Skull Candy, a multinational headphone CPG provider. To learn more about Stefan, please take a look in the speaker bio section of your console. Again, Stefan, welcome and thank you for joining us today. Before turning the presentation over to Stefan, I'd like to go over the learning objectives for today's program. After participating in this webinar, you will understand what factors are keeping accountants in their roles, learn how accountants are recalibrating their professional lives to gain more fulfillment, and we'll also explore what opportunities employers have to improve recruitment and retention within their accounting teams. We're looking forward to an informative presentation. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to you, Stefan, to begin.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you, IMA. I'm always happy to work with you guys. I've been, I think probably like most people on this webinar, I've been a member for years. But let's go over the agenda really quick. So the first thing, I'll just do a quick introduction of myself and our partners that helped us with this survey. But then we want to recap chapters 1 and 2 of the Controller's Guidebook. The reason being is, like any books, you just can't open it up and start reading a random chapter and understand the whole thing. So we kind of want to have a little bit of groundwork, a little bit of foundation before we discuss chapter 3. Then we're going to top into chapter 3 of our Controller Guidebook studies, which focuses on recalibration and retention and recruitment in the accounting industry. So we're going to talk about a few of those things: why people are staying, why people are having to recalibrate for greater fulfillment, and then finally we want to kind of wrap this all together and what can you do as an employer, what can you do as a manager to affect this? What's your takeaway? And then we'll have a small Q&A at the end for anybody that has any questions for us. With that, I'll just want to introduce FloQast really quickly. FloQast is an accounting workflow automation platform purpose-built by accountants for accountants. So 2 of our 3 co-founders were accountants that struggled with their financial close and task management and workflows and everything. And they said, why isn't there a solution that really is built the way we want to work in this space, that is helpful and affordable and everything else? And so that's why they built FloQast. And we're really, our goal is to help accounting teams achieve operational excellence. And we want to elevate accountants to a greater level. So we want to make sure that everybody is, getting the most out of their career, because this is a really good career, but it can be a really challenging one as well. And I'll just share one other fact with you guys. So one thing that I'm really proud of here at FloQast is that 98% of our customers achieve business value or target business value or higher, meaning that when we make a promise to you, we are almost completely fulfilling that promise. We want that to be over 100%. We want to give you more than what you think you're getting, but most companies don't even get you to 80% on this. So we're really proud of that. We're always striving for more. I can say as a past user of FloQast, I was definitely got more out of the tool than I thought I was even being promised. With that, I actually want to introduce or give you guys a little bit of background about the partner that helped FloQast with the survey. So when FloQast went about to do the survey, we really wanted to do a true survey. We didn't want it to be biased because of payment or anything like that. So we decided to work with an academic institution to help us kind of make sure we didn't have any of our own bias built into our own survey. And so we partnered with the University of Georgia Consumer Analytics Department, a wonderful department. And one of the, I think Dee Wormuth actually runs the entire thing, but I'm not sure. But Dee Wormuth was a PhD who really focuses on this research. She's worked with the Federal Reserve Bank in Atlanta. She's done a lot of these different kind of consumer research things. And so she was the one that really led this charge and partnered with her PhD student, Camden Cusimano, who helped her with it as well. But essentially, these are the people that came in, designed the questions, set the survey out to an independent population, and made sure all this stuff came back. And that's important to us at FloQast because we really want to know what the truth is. We don't want to be designing product or trying to address issues that don't exist. So we went this route, and we were very happy with working with them. You should definitely reach out to Dee if you get a chance. So with that, I'm going to go into a recap of chapters 1 and 2 of the Controller's Guidebook. And again, this is foundational just to make sure that chapter 3 really makes sense for everybody. And the first thing that we found when we did our first survey, because we've done 3 of them, this is the 3rd one, is we found something a little bit, I think a lot of us anticipated from anecdotal experience, but is definitely now foundationally understood that accountants everywhere are experiencing something called burnout. And a lot of us would maybe call this different things, whether it's, professional exhaustion, just being worn down by your career. But we've defined it as burnout. And there's a lot of different factors kind of going into that. And that's why we kind of continued the survey. But what we see is not just that majority of accountants, 99% of accountants or 98% of accountants are experiencing burnout, but it's really skewed in majority to greater than average to high and moderately high burnout. So if you think about the bell curve, this isn't a distribution that is necessarily even. It is more skewed towards higher levels of burnout. And why does that matter? Well, if you think about it, the way we kind of we apply this burnout methodology is we use something they use for surgeons to determine if surgeons are too burned out, if they're too tired to perform surgery, right? Because I think a lot of people can imagine if you go in to have an operation done, you don't want the doctor coming in the room and, being burned out, tired, exhausted in their life. You might tell them to take the day off, get some good rest, and maybe we can perform that surgery tomorrow after they're feeling better. Not today. And we use that same or similar methodology is what the University of Georgia applied to determine that accountants have that same level of burnout. And what we're seeing is while it's not in the operating room, it is, a center operational aspect of the organization, which is accounting, and it is costing accounting. So we'll get into that with a little bit more detail. And what we found is that burnout was highly related or correlated to the close process as well. So accountants that had a tough close, a close that was chaotic or smooth, those are the ones that are feeling the most burnout. And so we kind of came about that in the inverse. So if we look at this first graph, we would say the percentage of accountants satisfied with their job by their rating of close experience. If their rating of the close experience is very smooth, they have very low levels of burnout and very high job satisfaction, right? But if their rating of the close is mostly chaotic, you can see that they have very low rating of job satisfaction and very high levels of burnout. So we kind of see the inverse going on there. And so what it tells us is that the close is really this hero's journey that is a big aspect of what is hurting and burning out accountants in the profession. And we can see that even taking place in not just in professional career, but this is something that's also being brought home, right? So the percentage of people who strongly agree that close conflicts with their personal relationships, with those with high level of burnout, are by and large saying that the close, they are saying 3 times more likely that the close and is affecting their personal relationships. They are not making it home to dinner on time. They are not having good relationships with their friends and with their family and loved ones. And that, as a manager, as Sam was saying, I was a corporate controller, been a controller before. That is the last thing I want for myself or my team, right? We don't want to breed that environment. But the close is doing that, and it's driving this burnout. And it's not just affecting the personal lives of people, it's also affecting the organization. So if you're having a hard time convincing your organization that people are burned out and they should take notice of it, just as I said, with accounting being more of the hub of the operations of a company now, these days being brought more to the middle office instead of back office, it is also going to cost the organization when people are feeling burned out, just as it would a surgeon in the operating room. And what we're seeing is that 85% of the participants report having to reopen their books at least 1 month during the year to fix errors. And we see a majority of that is more likely to happen if people have high burnout. So the higher the burnout, the higher likely is that you're going to have to reopen your books. It's more than 2 times more likely. And 49% of the respondents said they had to reopen their books 3 or more months out of the year, again, correlated to that high level of burnout. And what does that tell us? Well, one, it tells us that if you're reopening the books, as you know, like I do not reopen my books to make an adjustment unless that is material, right? It is not, it's not appropriate to go back and do that, or unless it's at a year-end type thing or a quarter close that you have to report publicly. And what that's telling us is that accountants are going in and materially having to change their numbers 3 or more months out of the year. A quarter of the year or more, they are saying they are incorrectly doing their job, that they are not able to do their job correctly. And that is driven by that is driving high levels of burnout. And it's kind of like a vicious cycle where it's kind of both are doing the same thing. So this is really costing the organization, because if you think about it, you can't really make a good business decision if you're just serendipitously using bad information. So what do we do to fix that? Or is there other aspects that are really driving that issue? Well, the other thing, when we try to figure out what else could be driving this issue, we know the close is an issue, but what about the close is causing the issue? We find that one of the issues that is kind of underlying and prompting that up is that the relationship with technology is also driving that burnout. And what the University of Georgia really uncovered was that there was 3 types of accountant to technology relationship. The first one is adversarial. Technology is seen as a hindrance rather than a help. You are having to significantly work around the technology, think like the technology to get the work done. It is adding a lot of work. It's a burden. Then there's a routine relationship where I think a lot of us have lived in our lives. And that's a relationship where the technology is functional, but doesn't necessarily add value to their work or their life. And that what we would say there is that the technology can be understood and worked with the accountant, but it isn't necessarily working with the accountant. The accountant's working with the technology. It is, you are having to adapt yourself to work around it and think like the technology does. And then the last one, the most ideal, is synergistic relationship, which is technology is a true partner in the accountant's work. And a great example of that would be the technology works in the way that the accountant, the user, really wants to work, right? And that's what we want to see. So what does that really tell us? Well, we notice that there is, if as they were trying to define what these 3 types of relationships were, they really determined that the level of integration of your system, of your tool, was really important in determining what kind of relationship you have with that technology. So if we look at the first one, no integration, just means this tool is kind of off by itself, really standalone piece, doesn't integrate well with others. A system is something that has moderate integration, probably talks with most of the different tools you're using. However, it doesn't speak with them super natively or super cleanly. There's probably a lot of work around that has to be done in that way. And so why it is integrated, it is not super clean. And then the solution, a technology solution, as we would define it, is something that is highly integrated, right? So not only does it talk to everything that you use within your environment, and that's not just your ERP or your database or whatever, that is talking to even your whatever you use for chat, whether that's Teams or Slacks or anything else, Zoom, whatever you use for your file storage, whether that's OneDrive, Dropbox, Box, any of those things. It really fits within the entirety of your ecosystem. And that high level solution is driving more integration. And you can kind of see that below. So when we look at high integration score, most people are just saying that they have a synergistic relationship with their tool. Whereas if you look at low integration score, all of a sudden we drop significantly on the synergistic and we start seeing adversarial. One thing that's really interesting is if you look at routine has an even lower synergistic score and a higher adversarial score. And what we think is going on there, and we're not 100% sure, is that it's a failed promise of the technology that is burning people out even more. So you know the machine or the tool should be able to do more for you, but it just doesn't. And so what happens is you feel more burnout from that, right? Because if something doesn't integrate, you kind of expect it not to work well. With that, Sam, I'll pass it back to you for the first polling question.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Attendees should see the first polling question on your screen at this point. If you cannot see the poll question, please refresh your browser, which should correct the issue. Again, I'd like to remind all participants that you may begin responding to each question as soon as it appears on the screen. Our first polling question is, where do you think your current system environment falls on the integration scale? The options are A, none to limited integration, B, system level integration, C, solution level integration. Please note that after you select an answer, click the submit button, which is located on the right side of your screen just below the response option, in order to successfully record your answer. Stefan, you talked a little bit about the differences between integrated systems and integrated solutions. Can you share some tips of how you and the participants in the audience can identify the differences between those two?
Yeah, for sure. We'll have a slide on that later, but I'll go over a little bit of it right now. Again, I think the big thing to identify when you're trying to look at the different level of integration and the different level of whether it's routine or synergistic, it's really looking at it and saying, does this really fit in the entirety of my ecospace? So it's great. It connects to your it connects to your ERP. It connects via an API connection. That's wonderful. But is it connecting cleanly in all ways? Is it able to cleanly pull that data through and then freely manipulate it? Or is it something that is taking, maybe you have to put a middleware in place, like a IBM B2BI or whatever it is, to manipulate that data to really get it to work? Or once it's in your system doesn't really know what to do with it. So you have to have special coding or something or customization go on to help with that. That really should lower your level of integration score because it's not true integration. And when you look at it, if it does that cleanly, then you have a higher level of integration more towards that solution end. And another way to just look at it will also be is, does this technology work in the way I want to use it? If I pull out my cell phone, you pull out your iPhone for the first time, if you go back a few years, or an Android phone or whatever you use, you probably opened it and immediately knew how to use it, right? Very intuitive. If the technology is intuitive to you, that is another good indication that it is more on the solution end than the system end, and that's where we want to be.
I think we got level of response now, Stefan. If you'd like to cover those.
Yeah, that'd be great. So it looks like a lot of people are saying they're at the system level of integration, which is not surprising. It's not surprising at all. I think a lot of us lived in that space. I know I lived in that space. I had very few tools that I felt were more on that solution level, but they do exist and you can build that ecosystem. And I think as technology companies go around in the fintech space, they are learning that they need to consider the human element a lot more. And so we're seeing some good change in the industry. So it's not surprising at all. I've been on other ones of these presentations where actually that solution level integration is a lot higher. So I guess what I'm trying to tell everybody is don't be worried if you feel like you're at the system level. There is a greener pasture that you can get to. It is possible, and we will get you there. So with that, I'm going to transition kind of into some more content on chapter 1 and 2, but the relationship with technology matters as much as the function of the technology. So that goes back to what I was saying with the technology. Really, we find that the relationship with that technology really does drive significantly on burnout. So if we look at our burnout scores below, if you have a synergistic relationship, we're seeing very low levels of burnout, predominantly low and medium low, and we're seeing really small amounts of that high level of burnout. But then when you get to that routine, again, we're seeing that all of a sudden you get a high level burnout. In fact, it's higher than even adversarial. And that goes back to what we are believing might be that you have technology that is promising you something, and the fact that it has promised you integration, that has promised you it's a solution, but it's not acting that way, it's acting as a system, is more frustrating than if someone just said we don't integrate with things. If you tell me you can't do it, then I just accept that fact and I move on. But if you tell me you can and you can't, then all of a sudden I'm a lot more frustrated. So that's what we think is going on there. But we're seeing that there's a huge 11-point difference with those relationships. And then we also see that the technology relationship is mimicking close and like how difficult your close is with how it drives burnout and accuracy within the organization. So we're seeing a disruption correlation that is very similar here. So the average number of months personal life was negatively impacted. If you have a synergistic relationship, it's 2 months. But if you have a adversarial relationship, it's 3.5, right? So it's quite a bit more likely to interrupt your personal life, as was the closer people. And the average number of months the books were reopened is also very similar. We have 2.6 if you have synergistic, and we have 4, a third of the year, if you have an adversarial relationship. So it just goes to show that this relationship with technology is really a supporting factor in what's driving a difficult close and what is driving burnout for individuals. And then the technology relationship influences so much more in your work persona than just than just the technology, or sorry, than just your personal life, than just how well you close the books and how accurately you can report information. And I think this is really important to consider. Again, if you are a manager, these are things that you care for yourself, but you also care for the people that are reporting into you and what you want for them. So we find that with obviously the blue is, if you can see that, is your synergistic, and your orange is your adversarial. So personal competencies of your work. You feel that you are very much more competent at your work if you have a synergistic relationship with your technology. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but if we explore just one of them, it can be the fact that if the technology works the way you think and operates the way you want, it's very easy for you to achieve what you have in front of you. You understand it very natively and you can achieve those goals. But if you have to work around it significantly to get the work done, all of a sudden you're not necessarily solving the accounting issue in front of you. You're solving a technology issue. And that's not what you've been trained for. That's not what you went to school for. That's not why you're in this profession. And so it becomes a lot more difficult to feel like you're competent at work. But that is a significant drop, precipitous, from 71% to 20%. I mean, even if you look at routine, that's we're at a 23% percent drop there. So it's really significant what's going on here. Your voice within the organization. So a lot of accountants, and we kind of uncovered this back in chapter 2, but we're going to talk a little bit about it more in chapter 3. But your voice in the organization is greater if you have a synergistic relationship. Your career potential, people feel their career potential is a lot greater, and I think that can go back to competencies and voice and everything else. But that's a really important thing. You want people to feel like they have a career trajectory. Your income. This one I think is quite interesting. You feel that you are more appropriately paid if you have a synergistic relationship with your work than if not, right? And I think that makes a lot of sense because you're probably not working as much, you're not probably working as long, you're probably not feeling as burned out and unappreciated if the technology is working with you and not against you. And something that I think is really important and should never be underscored is work-life balance, right? People that have a synergistic relationship are by and far reporting better work-life balance than not. And again, we're seeing a 20% drop, a 20-point drop if we look at synergistic to routine, and another 7 or so points if you look at adversarial. So it's really affecting the entirety of your work persona and should be taken into consideration. And then one thing that I find really interesting that is kind of a new added one here is the belief that you have enough time to complete your work by technology relationship is, if it's synergistic, you feel more likely than not that you can complete your work, right? That you have enough time to complete your work. But it drops again very much if you have a routine or adversarial, because you are having to spend more time to work around that technology and think like the technology than it work and think the way you want to. So it doesn't let you utilize your competencies that you've been honing for years. It is actually making you kind of develop new ones to troubleshoot. And so our final kind of capstone on 1 and 2 is, what do we need to change in order to progress here? Well, we need to change the way we evaluate technology. And we think especially around the close, right? So we've kind of linked, hopefully you've seen that link in the presentation, that burnout is significantly driven by your close experience. So we know the close is a huge factor in how how you feel about work, how much you're burned out, how you're able to do your work. And we can see in the last slide with work persona, it's affecting a lot of different aspects of who we are. And we find that technology is a big factor in the way people are feeling about their clothes and they're feeling about the burnout. So if you change the way you evaluate technology and you focus around your clothes, you have, we're finding that the people that have done that have a lot less burnout, feel a lot more job satisfaction, and are able to do a much better job at work. And so what are the factors that kind of identify that? Well, I went over a few of them in the poll questions. Hopefully you heard those. But here's a few other ways to consider about it. So again, we want to move away from an integrated system, right? It is integrated, a system is integrated, but we want to move to an integrated solution. We want that integration to be on the next level, and don't think about it just checking IT boxes. It needs to check boxes of working into your entire ecosystem the way you want it to work into your entire ecosystem. We want to look at not how well the technology performs. Does it check the box of it? It gives you the output regardless of the way it did it, it gives you the output that you wanted? No, we want to see how well it performs for the user. Is it providing that output the way the user wanted to go about that solution? And that's an important thing. That's an important distinction to make. And perhaps, in my opinion, the greatest distinction that needs to make. And instead of looking integration, again, based off IT requirements, think about the user and the user's thinking. And then finally, we think it needs to be less of a transactional relationship, saying, hey, I'm buying this technology because it is checking, X amount of boxes. It went through discovery with IT or whatever, that instead it feels like a partnership. And that can extend, and I think it should, to does this technology solution feel like a partnership in its entirety? So do the people you work with at that solution feel like they're partnering with you, or do they feel like they're just, putting this on you and running away? In my experience, a lot of companies will sell you and maybe they'll do a quick training and then they'll move on. And we want to get away from that. We want that to be more of a partnership. Are they working with you? Are they continuing trying to understand your pain points, evolve, and grow their solution around you? So think about that aspect as well, the entirety of the company you're working with. So with that, I wanted to get into chapter 3, right? So what are the implications of recruiting intention when we talk about burnout, when we talk about technology? Are there any? Well, we're finding by and large, yes, that there is significant implications there. So to first kind of level set on how we came up with this data, we did a survey conducted online. Well, I say we, University of Georgia Consumer Data Analytics Department did this survey conducted online early October 2022 with 203 accountants of the finance profession with a precision sample group. So they really identify who they want to work with and how it looks. And then we look at the data after the fact. Specifically, I will look at the data after the fact to make sure it's kind of hitting the personas that we really want them to hit. So we want to see like a good distribution in their tenure, profession, and current employer, right? So the first like darker green one is years in accounting and finance, so their total career, and the lighter green, the second bar for each one of those is their current time with their current employer. And so what we're seeing is that a lot of these people, some of them are 1 to 3 years in their career, 1 to 3 years within, or 1 to 5 years with their employer, and that's a good chunk. But a lot of them are quite a bit more mature in that 6 to 10, and we want to make sure that we get a good distribution of those 11 to 20 and 21 plus years. And I think if anybody's seen any data about CPAs in the accounting industry, and I imagine it follows very similar to the CMA, is by and far it's skewed towards a more aging population, that there's not a lot of new people coming into the profession, and you kind of have an upside down pyramid on the population graph on what's going on. So a lot of the professionals out there have been in the profession for a long time, and there's no one coming in to replace them. And so we see that in our tenure and current employer. And then if you look at the personas that we tackle, we're getting a reward from CFO and chief accounting officer to just an accountant, right? We want to know what your specialist feels like. We want to know what your accounting staff feels like, or your seniors feel like. We also talk about to a few cost accountants, VP of controller, VP of finance, and even a little bit of internal audit, just to make sure that we get a good mix of personas that we get this information from. And something that I think a lot of us will find most important is that within the job range of titles, 64% of them were CPAs and 75% of them done work in audit. So it just lets us know that a lot of them have gone through a lot of the gauntlet in the career, though by no means necessary to have done that. And a lot of them, though we don't have that data because we didn't ask at the time, probably have their CMA designation as well. And then when we look at organization characteristics, right? So a lot of companies, when they do these samplings, will sample just one industry or one industry that's easy to get to. But we want to make sure that we got a good sampling of industries and a good sampling of kind of company staging, if that makes sense. So what we find is the size of the department. We had a few that were in that 1 to 5, which is a lot of your small, medium businesses. Quite a few that were anywhere in that medium to enterprise size of 6 to 20, and then definitely your enterprise of 20 plus. And then we made sure we got quite a few startups, scaling IPO, recent IPO public, and even some non-for-profits and other types of organizations in there as well. So again, trying to make sure that we get the entirety of the accounting persona. So what we want to look at is, why are they staying? What is driving people to stay in their current roles, whether that's with their employer or even just in the profession itself. And what we're finding is that the people that are staying with the company, there's not a lot of them actually. So about half of accountants are not entirely sure if they'll stay with their current employer, right? They're saying, well, I don't know if this is the place for me, if I want to, if this is the path for me, right? And of those, of the 53 that are not entirely sure, a majority aren't even sure they'll stay as accountants in the next 2 to 3 years. So 65% of those are saying that they might not even want to be an accountant in the next 2 to 3 years. That is how high this level of burnout is, right? So there is a very small percentage who are saying they want to stay with their employer, and most likely even stay in the percentage. And I think, if this was even 20% of people said that they didn't want to stay in their current in the profession, we'd be like, what is going on here? But it's much more than that, right? So it's pretty drastic to see. So then we look at of those who are staying, are they trying to fix it or are they trying to leave it, right? So this is essentially saying, are the people that are looking, or even if they're not sure, are they staying and they want to fix the issue, or are they just going to leave it? And what we find is that only about 11% of accountants will actually raise their hand to the organization, speak up, when they believe work conditions are less fulfilling than they need to be, and voice their frustrations about what's going on. Most, almost half, will try to figure out how to fix the situation themselves. And that's to say, these are the individuals, and I was definitely like this, where it's like, I would try to raise my hand as much as I could, but a lot of times I would just try to roll up my sleeves and fix it myself, because the organization, it really isn't listening to you. But what is pretty crazy is that 41% these days will just leave it. They'll say, listen, I know I can't fix it. I know no one will listen. At least that's their opinion. So I'm just going to leave and go on to the next company. And I think a lot of companies are facing this issue right now. If you look at job postings, it's hard to retain people. It's hard to recruit them. And then we say, okay, well, what's technology have to do with this? Does technology really have anything to do with this? And what Dee and her team find out is that accountants who work with an integrated technology solution, again, that highest level that is more on the synergistic kind of relationship with the accountant, are the ones that are more likely to stay and have a chance of staying in their jobs. So we find that 80% of people that reported that they would stay in their role, 80% of people that have integrated technology solutions said that they will stay in their current job. And that's a majority of what we're seeing. Whereas if they have a integrated technology system, that drops significantly, right? It goes down to 19%. That if it is just a routine relationship, if it is just integrated technology system, which is what most of you reported in the previous poll question of having, they're very unlikely to stay. And if there's no integration, obviously that drops even more. So I want you to think about that personally as we kind of go through this presentation. Are you one of those people that is like, I'm not really satisfied, and I think I'm going to probably have to leave? So that's kind of saying, okay, who is there to stay? And then we look at technology and recruitment. We say 63% say the level of importance they place on technology as a job factor consideration has changed over the past 2 to 3 years. So 96% of people are saying that they are at least somewhat likely to ask about technology solutions in their next job interview. And I can say that I was doing this 5 years ago when I was interviewing. It was really important for me to know what kind of environment I was walking into, not just the composition of my team and the people on it, not just the culture of the company, my boss, and the different executives that I'd be working for, but what tools have they put in place for me to help my team grow, for me to exceed in the mission that I've been given. And I think that that's grown significantly over the last 2 to 3 years, that people are realizing intuitively that technology is really a factor in how satisfied they are with their job, and might be the reason why they're leaving their current job. So we can also see how likely, and you can see that in the graphs below. So how likely are you to ask? Well, extremely likely is 43%. The importance of technology, 63%, right? So pretty significant. Poll question 2, Sam, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Stefan. Attendees should see the second polling question now on your screen. If you cannot see the poll question, please refresh your browser. That should correct the issue. Again, as a reminder, all participants may begin responding to each question as soon as it appears on your screen. Our second polling question is, to what extent have you noticed an increase in technology environment questions in recruitment in the past 18 months compared to 5 years ago? And the options are A, increased a lot, B, increased a little, or C, no change. Again, please be sure to click the submit button located on the right side of your screen just below the response options in order to successfully record your answer. While we're waiting for the responses to Bill, Stefan, just a quick question. Can you give us a reminder how the participants can acquire the Controller's Guidebook?
Yeah, so I think, and I'll have to double check this, but it might be part of your download material at the end of this presentation, so you might be able to get it there. But if not, go onto our website at FloQast.com, and we have a whole kind of website dedicated to it where you can download the Controller's Guidebooks, chapters 1 through 3, kind of read through those and see all the information. And I just had it confirmed. It's a link in the post event email. So we'll send out a link in the post event email, and you'll be able to see it there. But read through it, give it a good thought. And then I believe we have access to even some of our past presentations if you want to see it on our website as well. And, also reach out to us and give us your perspective. We always love to hear from people at info@flowcast.com. It can really help us really determine where we're going with our technology.
All right, I think we've got a response calculated here. If you'll take that, Stefan.
For sure. So what we're finding is that 40% of people, so 2/5 of people, are saying it's increased a lot. They're seeing a lot of it. 43%, almost half, are saying that it's increased a little bit, and only 50% are saying no change. And what I would also just, when you guys think about, has this conversation increased in the recruiting space, also think about it where it's increased in the retention space. Have you had more conversations internally with your staff, with your boss, with your peers on technology and its role in the accounting and finance function? I noticed in my career that when I first started, we didn't really talk about it much. We really accepted the status quo of what technology we were using, whether that was SAP, NetSuite, anything else, whatever you're using for your closed solution or your different point solutions. But as I've progressed in my career, I've noticed that when I talk to my accounting managers, when I talk to my specialists, when I talk to my providers, it seems like a lot more of our day-to-day conversations were actually focused around the technology than necessarily the issues or a specific accounting issue. It was taking almost as much of the conversation as dealing with different operational issues within the organization. So I think there's been a shift culturally and in the mindset of the greater organizations as well. So think about it from a retention point of view as well. So the next thing we want to really talk about is recalibrating for greater fulfillment. So what do we mean by that? Well, what we're seeing is that accountants are seeking to restore the work-life balance in search of this greater fulfillment from their role. So they're saying, I am very burned out. The technology isn't working for me. The close is a hero's journey that I'm just tired of facing. And this is not working for me. There's too many other options in life for me to have to stick with this one. And so it's kind of a silent movement that has been happening amongst accountants for the last couple of years where they are looking for a recalibration of their work-life balance. And I think a lot of what people have seen is the Great Resignation that was happening in the last couple of years, where people are leaving their jobs in drove. You had a lot of silent quitting, things like that. And this is kind of the next step in that, what we're calling the Great Recalibration, where people are taking that next step in saying, I'm not just going to silent quit. I'm going to actively look to recalibrate my work-life balance. It is not just to get out of my current situation. It is to find a specific goal in the future. And so fulfillment from the profession is really key to this retention, is what we find out. So when we look at fulfillment from the profession, it exists when the accountant believes their work is meaningful, when their work is important. They feel that it would take quite a bit for them to leave their current role and their current professions. And something that is really significant in this is that they share with others how much they love what they do. So they are, so to speak, evangelists, right? They are preaching the good word of accountants and Luca Pacioli. But I think the percentage of accountant professionals who will stay in their jobs related to their current levels of fulfillment is a very strong correlation. We're seeing that if they are, their fulfillment level is very high, it is very, very likely they stay in their role. And that decreases a lot as it just even goes to high. If they go from very high to high, we're down at 45%-ish that they're likely to stay in their role, right? So you really have a pretty significant event horizon to pass, a pretty big hurdle to pass to make it to where people want to say you need to give them high levels of job satisfaction, or else they're just going to go chase the next opportunity to recalibrate. And that also, if you remember back, really translates to what we were seeing with technology, right? So all these things have this really strong correlation that is telling an overall story here. And that work-life balance really matters in their career fulfillment, and that the average level of career fulfillment by satisfaction, if it's very high, obviously we're seeing a very similar distribution here as we were in the previous one, that that satisfaction work-life balance is strongly correlated. So if you want to get people into that very high category in the previous slide, you want to retain them, they need to have work-life balance. If they don't, you're never going to get there. And a lot of what's driving that is going to be with your technology and how that's put in place. And accountant satisfaction with the work-life balance is pretty skewed, right? So we find that more than 60% of accountants report they struggle with imbalances between work and life. I can say from my personal anecdotal experience, that is very true, not only for me, but for my friends, for my colleagues, for the people that worked for me. And that was very frustrating to see. That was incredibly frustrating to live through, but it was also incredibly frustrating to see because it makes you think there isn't a better path forward. So we see that only 36% reported extremely satisfied with their work-life balance, where 64% reported otherwise. And that's a terrible number. We need to, as an industry, need to flip that on its head, or even more. And we find that the ability to complete your work is also strongly related to this. So we say most accountants report that they are struggling to have enough time to complete their work. So percentage of accountants who agree they're able to complete their work, only 39%, only 2/5 report that they have enough time to complete their work, whereas 61% are saying they just don't, right? And this isn't back in public accounting where a lot of us started, where you never had enough time to complete your work, is what it felt like. This is an industry where it's supposed to be better, and people are still struggling with that. Your employees are feeling, if you have a team of 5, you have 3 employees that are saying, I don't have enough time to complete my work. Maybe that's you and 2 others, or maybe that's 3 of the people that you're working for. And that's not how you want to have your people existing. They cannot perform at their best in that environment. Accountants' desire for a more strategic role. So this is really interesting. So we see that people are really struggling with work-life balance, having enough time to complete their work, struggling with their technology system that's in place. But that to get to that very high, that real interesting hurdle we had a couple slides ago, there's a little bit more that needs to happen in order for people to feel very satisfied. And what we find is that most accountants aspire to have a more strategic role in the organization, or we could say is most accountants are saying they don't have a strategic role in the organization. So we do know, and we kind of cover this in other material of ours, but accounting has moved from this back office kind of, we report on it, it's not a big deal, to a center, like more middle office hub within the organization that is really an operational heartbeat. It is clear that information needs to get into accounting. It needs to be disseminated, needs to be compiled and analyzed, and then reported back out so people can make key business decisions. And we've seen that through the Great Recession. We've seen that through the pandemic. We're seeing it even now in our current fall to market. But what we're seeing is why that shift has happened. Most accountants, as they've moved to this middle office, still don't feel like they have a strategic role, and they're struggling with that. They really want it. And this profession for quite a while has promised that. So what we're seeing is just in this graph that the importance of making sure your people feel like they're in a strategic role is also a very key element in this. So it's not just about satisfying the work-life balance, making sure they have enough time to complete the work, make sure they have the right solution, but is that also translating into them feeling like they're in a more strategic role? And then we look at the role of technology in completing that work, right? So we know that work-life balance is difficult. What does technology have to do with that? Well, we find if people have an integrated solution, they are by and large more likely to feel like they have enough time to complete the work. And we covered that in chapter 2 a little bit. So we know that technology now is a key factor in driving that work-life balance. That's driving that solution can really drive that satisfaction in the job, and that will therefore drive their ability to retain people, right? And then we see that the role of technology in the pursuit of more strategic role is also important. So percentage of professionals who believe they can complete their work by whether they desire a more strategic role. Well, if they have a integrated solution, they are saying that they have a more strategic role and that they're able to complete the work. So there's kind of satisfying both of those things. So that's incredibly important too. We're seeing at least 2/5 are able to achieve that more strategic role and get into that very highly satisfied with their work-life balance. So again, that's how we kind of drive that is it seems technology does have a strong play in creating the capacity for people to feel like they have a more strategic role. And I think if we take a step back into that work persona, well, we can see that if people have an integrated solution, they feel like their work persona is better, their voice is larger, they feel like they're more competent at their work. And we think that that is also kind of pushing the strategic role, that they're naturally getting into this more strategic role as well. So that all kind of links. And I think if you start putting these foundational aspects within your organization, you'll start to see these changes as well. So with that, we'll get to our final polling question. Sam, I'll pass it back.
Thank you again, Stefan. Attendees may respond to the poll question immediately as I read through the question. The third polling question is, using the scale below, what level of fulfillment would you say your work gives you currently? A, strong, B, some, C, not sure, D, little, E, none. Please take a moment to submit your answer, then click the submit button on the right just below the response options. Quick question, if I may, Stefan, while we're waiting, just either anecdotally or perhaps other things that you've read. Are the results of the survey that you're talking about today, you have any comparison to the finance profession at large, and then even by extension to other professions? Do you have any sort of data points there?
We don't have strong data points. We really tried to, when we built out this, and I think I saw a question down below where someone was saying, hey, it looks like you're maybe talking about different surveys. We've done 3 surveys kind of building on information that we've learned from each one. So we did 1 survey for chapter 1, 1 survey for chapter 2, 1 survey for chapter 3. We capture a lot of the same individuals, but we kind of build our questions as we learn from the previous surveys. But we really try to keep that persona pretty closely tied to the accounting profession, so to keep its relevance really strong. However, I think anecdotally, we can see that the finance profession is going to feel, as it is our partner organization within the Office of the CFO, very similar pain points as the accounting organization. Maybe not completely exactly alike, but they're going to have similar issues where if their technology is underperforming for them, they're going to feel that burnout. They are also wanting more strategic roles, a bigger voice within the organization, and they want to feel less burnout. And a lot of the finance tools out there, I think, again, anecdotally speaking from the professionals I've worked with, really fail to meet what they're looking for as well. And so it's really a similar kind of burnout that we're probably going to experience there as well.
All right, thank you. We got the compilation here, Stefan, so back to you.
All right. So we find that, using the scale, what level of fulfillment people say. I love to see that, almost, what do we have? 28% are saying strong levels of satisfaction, fulfillment. And I love that. I want that to be, though, like 98%. That's what this profession needs to be, right? I love, some is still better than none. But, we have quite a few people that are feeling none. If we think about the fact that we have about 1,500 live participants right now and 2% are saying none, that's not one or two people. Um, and we find a lot of them are saying little, right? So we have at least, almost 180 people saying that they have little satisfaction and quite a few just unsure. So I think there's a lot of self-reflection that can happen from this that we can take away from today. So the final thing I want to go over just as a capstone to all of this is what can an employer do? Um, and I've hinted at a lot of this, so hopefully none of this is new. But there's quite a bit that I think an employer can do to kind of tackle retention and recruitment within their organization. The employees believe that that an employee's belief in their company's ability to provide the right technology solution really truly matters in retention. And what we say by this is you have to, as an employer, convince your employees. You need to make them to believe, even if you don't necessarily have the right tool in place, they believe that you can identify, you can implement, and you can service and manage a solution, and that you're going to do that in the future. So I think what we find is that the probability of staying based off that belief is quite strong. So that's just to say that if people see that there is progress within their organization, they will bet on the organization, they will stay, right? So as long as you're able to build that dream and kind of that belief, you will get there and you will buy yourself time and you will be able to retain for a period of time. Now, if you cannot deliver on that, you will immediately lose those people, right? Because if you ruin someone's belief, I think we can all say from personal experience, they will immediately do an about face with it. So you can buy yourself time, but then you do have to deliver. And then the solution, right? So the Great Recalibration has revolutionized technology's role in the accountant and the accounting profession. So what do we mean by that? Well, we think you need to take a proactive approach in assessing your technology for the accountant and their work. And we talked about that a little bit in chapter 2's recap, and we talked about it in chapter 3, where look at your technology. Is it thinking the way the user wants to have it? Do you even have a solution in place for every part of your record to report landscape? That is to say, once the economic event happens, you either procure the materials, you buy the widget, you sign the contract, you sell the material, whatever it is. Once that economic event happens, all the way to the reporting, do you have a tool in the entirety of that landscape? What we find is a lot of people don't. And are you focusing on the right part of that landscape first? Are you tackling kind of the 80-20, the thing that provides you the most yield for the least amount of work? So for us, and what our study is saying, we think a lot of that is actually the financial close. Are you supporting the financial close with a true software, or are you just using something that's been handed to you in your ERP, right? Thinking integrated technology solutions is so incredibly important. They are purpose built for the user, right? Again, how the user wants to think, how they want to feel. I'll give a quick example of this so we still have enough time for our Q&A, but a good example of this is a lot of ERPs, when they do your depreciation for you, when you run your depreciation module, they say, oh, you're depreciating over 5 years, that's 60 periods. We'll do 1/60 percentage rate against this asset value that you've given us, and that's what we'll depreciate every month. But because it is a percentage and it is based off just two metrics and it is not a true amortization schedule, if you have to change the value of that asset, if you have to change the years, the useful life of that asset, all of a sudden it can't do the percentages correctly. It does not have an equation built well enough to do that. Whereas if it had built a true amortization schedule, it could cut off, identify the appropriate data that needs to do, and redo the analysis using percentages, and it would be just fine. But they don't do it because it thinks the way technology wants to and not the way the user does their work. And that's a pretty clear example of why you have to get a lot of asset-heavy companies get a specific asset management depreciation fixed asset tool separate from their ERP in place. And then ensure your organization is capable of identifying, procuring, and deploying the solutions in ways to reinforce that belief that we talked about in the previous slide. right? So again, you need to be able to identify and procure it and then deploy it. But you will buy yourself some time for that, and be prepared, be actively prepared to address these questions within your organization, whether that's with your current employees or when you're looking to retain or recruit talent. Maybe bring that forward in your job description. Maybe have it as part of your conversation with your sourcing so that people know that you take an active approach in this. And with that, we'll pass it off back to you, Sam, for a bonus polling question, and then we can get into any Q&A.
All right. Thank you again, Stefan. Please refresh your browser if you can't see the question. Again, I'd like to remind you that you can begin responding to each question as soon as it appears on your screen. Our fourth polling question is, do you plan to start using your technology relationship as a recruiting and retention tool? And the options are A, yes, B, no, C, potentially. Again, as a reminder, be sure to click the submit button, which is located on the right side of your screen just below the response options, in order to successfully record your answer. Again, quick question for you, if I may, Stefan. Obviously, a hot topic today is return to work versus remote work. Any data there or any thoughts specifically as it relates to being able to attract and retain younger professionals as the return to work is becoming more prominent?
Yeah, we've seen definitely data out in the industry. That'd be a great question for Dee. If whoever asked that question wants to reach out to us at info@flowcast.com, we will reach out to Dee and see if that was one of the questions that she has kind of identified in her bigger population of questions. It's like 200 some odd questions, I think. Have I seen the specific data from our survey? No, I have not. Well, I can tell you, reading Accounting Today, PwC, Deloitte, KPMG, everybody else's Wall Street Journal, I do think there is a lot of data out there supporting that remote work is very important to people and is very key in kind of that job satisfaction. How that plays out in the industry, we really haven't uncovered it ourselves too much yet.
All right, thank you. I think we've got sufficient level of answers now, so I'm going to ask you.
I'll push it back. Yeah, I'll push it back to, do we have any other questions out there, Sam? Do people have?
Yeah, a couple actually.
Questions?
Yeah, if I just quickly. So obviously understanding that volume and the tediousness of workload contribute to burnout. And then given that automation is somewhat limited in how much it can address these issues, what's your opinion on the profession relooking at SOX from a cost benefit perspective? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, so if I understand that one correctly, I do think automation is really key to burnout. I think and that goes back to like an integrated solution a little bit as well. But I think if you can drive, a lot of tools are looking at finding ways to cheaply drive automation within an organization and having that part of their like core functionality. And I think that really helps to drive an integrated solution and a system, synergistic. Sorry, it took me a second to remember the word synergistic relationship. Because if we think about it, true automation doesn't really happen unless it is communicating effectively between the systems and it's pushing that data on to the next system or the next step in the process. And what we find is that you're not probably very high on that integration scale if you maybe automate the task internally in that system, but then can't push the result into the next system or do something with it. And so what we find is that it is important with automation that whatever it does is kind of either helps it be the final piece or can at least communicate that result in a suitable way for the account to take it forward. So I do think automation plays a key role in that, and that more solutions are driving more cost-effective ways to scale in that space. Whether that's, I've seen it personally, whether that's in our product, which does a pretty good job of that, but even in your EDI platforms, ERPs are looking to even have more automation that is more cost-effective for people as well.
All right, thank you, Stefan. Attendees should see the evaluation survey open on your screen. If it did not open, please click the evaluation survey icon at the bottom of your screen for access. It is really important, and we do appreciate your feedback. So please complete the survey while we address some remaining questions. Just real quickly with the time we have left, if you could summarize, Stefan, some ideas how participants can effectively share information that you've provided with us today to their CFO so that their teams can take action. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think we'll definitely provide you with some post-event email that has some of this material. And I think just providing them with the white paper on these controller guidebooks, especially chapter 3, can be very enlightening to them, and really help them understand that there is data behind why they need to change the way they're doing their job, the way they assess their environment, the way they handle their team. And a lot of them might not realize that. They might not have an eye on accounting. They might not be looking at this. But if you put the data in front of them and you draw the parallels to this burnout and performance, this burnout and opening and closing the books, if your CFO is competent, they're going to listen. They're going to hear that, and they will probably change their ways. So I think start there, or what you might do if you don't think you can get them to read the whole thing is read all 3 of them, create a very small summary form, and provide it to them. Maybe a few things that you might think helps them or whatever. And also a lot of these events, you can record, or we have them downloaded and you can get them afterwards. Maybe just send them a link. So those might be some ways to start having that conversation and have it more of a data-driven conversation where they're not just thinking that you're complaining, which hopefully they wouldn't in the first place, but it just helps give you a stronger position. I would also like to shout out Professor Jen Harrison, who's listening in. This was a professor of mine back in college, so I'm really happy to find out. She just messaged me that she is listening in.
All right. Stefan, thank you again. We greatly appreciate you sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today. We're certainly very appreciative of you making time for IMA and for our audience. And thanks to all of our attendees for taking time out as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam. We'll love working with you guys at IMA.